God isn't master of the universe, He-Man is.
He-Man is more powerful than Jesus Christ.
Right. He-Man has more power than Jesus.
Skeletor, the master of the universe. But today, there's a different kind of cartoon that's coming on our TV sets, and the question is there a well-organized plot, an insidious design right now to program and influence the minds of our children towards the occult and witchcraft?
What's good, family? Welcome to Pretty Realist. If this is your first time joining my channel, welcome. And we've all been hearing that we are under some type of spiritual warfare. Everybody has been talking about it. It's going viral on social media. And I found myself wanting to find out more about how did the Black community become so just unhinged.
You on camera, so you going to jail. You going to jail. Damn! Really? Wow, that's crazy. Oh my God. Oh my God. Is the police on the way?
I'm gonna just go ahead and just say it. Demonic. It's a lot of demonic stuff that's going on that I remember at one point coming up that we would hear about or we would see on the news, and we just will automatically assume that we know that Black folks ain't do that. But nowadays it's nah, it don't matter what race they are. Everybody's crazy.
If your kids is like Satan, then you gotta kill them. Because you always gotta kill the devil. And then sometimes the devil will come in the form of your kids.
Everybody crazy, everybody into something. And then with the influx of people missing and people, women in general, mothers who are literally murdering their children, I found myself just wanting to know, is there some type of hysteria that's going on? Because this is something that I had never heard of. And then I was led to this story.
Some are calling it a war on the children.
Young people's imaginations have become the battlefield. Whatever gets their imagination gets their worship. Whatever gets their worship gets their heart.
The media bombards kids today with messages, many with satanic overtones.
Satan's not stupid. He understands that kids today are visual, and so he's making a play for excitement, for total involvement of the senses.
Now, I never heard of the Satanic Panic. I didn't even know that it was a big thing. And the more that I looked into it, I was just okay, I do kind of remember how there were certain movies that was out around that time. We had movies like The Exorcist that was out. Now Rosemary's Baby, that came out before I was born, or before I even really was able to even watch movies, because around that time, our parents did not let us watch certain things or listen to certain music. All kinds of games like Dungeons and Dragons was out, and apparently parents were losing their minds because they really thought that their children were possibly entertaining demons. So I was okay, let me look more into it. And listen, I was shocked by this story. I was even more shocked that CBS covered it. But could this be something that is going on right now? And they knew around that time that it was going on, and they kind of swept it under the rug? Because mind you, this was something that was just looked at as hysteria. It was looked at as something that really was not happening. But then we look around today and we're seeing our news, and we're seeing that no, shit like this is actually happening in America.
This court is so sick and tired of seeing adults ruin and abuse children. These are literally just one step from being babies. They come to a daycare, those parents struggle so that when they release their children to someone during the day, they have some semblance that that child is going to be protected and safe. not let alone 2 of their children being raped by your
woman
own
accused of
admissions.
sexually abusing 3 children that she was supposed to be babysitting, pleading guilty to several charges of endangering children today in court. Prosecutors say Kimberly Highnight was operating an unlicensed daycare out of her home. At the time of her indictment, prosecutors say that Highnight had children involved in sexually touching. She will now spend 30 days in jail.
Let me tell you, it was basically a mass moral hysteria that swept through the United States. Now, I read that it did start in Canada. It was based on like a widespread and mostly unfounded, which they were saying that they didn't have any evidence that these things were actually taking place. But it was a belief that there were literally secret networks of satanic worshiping cults that were committing all of these rituals, not just with animals, but like actual children were being murdered around this time. And then like talk shows and church groups, even law enforcement, they all began to take it real seriously. Daytime TV, the news, all the evangelists, they amplified it. They made a lot of money off of it. They was talking about it. They was in schools talking about it. Of course, you know, Geraldo, clout chasing ass, was definitely talking about it. He was always talking about some crazy stuff. Even 2020, Oprah did specials on satanic ritual abuse. What really hit hard was the daycare trials. Yeah. Now, the daycare trials, it basically was some daycare workers and teachers who were accused of doing these sacrifices to children in a daycare. It was the most infamous, longest, costliest criminal trial in U.S. history, and it was called the McMartin preschool case, and this took place in California. Now, you and I both know, looking at California today compared to then, I don't know, y'all. I kind of feel like that shit was really going on. They were trying to say that they were literally trying to tell these kids what to say. And then many described like impossible things, like underground tunnels, animal sacrifices. Some even said that they seen witches flying. Listen, like I said, like nowadays in 2025, ain't shit too far-fetched. But back then, it was looked at as just being fraudulent and being inaccurate and not making sense. Police and prosecutors, they were all trained to see satanic symbols, ritual clues everywhere. Like they were really lurking in the shadows to see if they got any evidence of somebody doing something satanic. The reality is by the 1990s, FBI got involved, the Department of Justice got involved. I'm telling you, like looking at it now, it really feels like they was just covering the shit up because they also were part of it. The Satanic Panic never really died. They want to say that it did, but it really didn't. And I feel like the spirit still lives on in modern day society. I was really interested in seeing what was the news really talking about around that time. So this is a little bit of vintage tea. I'm gonna go ahead and let this video play. Of course, you know I'm gonna give my little takes in and out, but let's go ahead and get this going. I'll be right back with my commentary.
In early 90s, a wave of troubling accusations swept across North America.
New and intense scrutiny on the activities of satanic cults.
Stories of devil worship and satanic cults corrupting young minds.
Unbelievable crime at the hands of satanic cults.
There were terrifying tales of secret satanic cults bent on tormenting and corrupting the young. Heavy metal music had hidden satanic messages.
Possibly satanic messages on some rock music recordings.
And games like Dungeons and Dragons were luring kids to devil worship. And it got even stranger.
Allegations of physical and sexual abuse of children at a babysitting service.
The dark world of ritualistic child abuse.
There's a widely held opinion that what happened at the daycare was the devil's handiwork.
Underground networks of Satanists were infiltrating daycares and preschools to physically and sexually abuse children in occult rituals. Much of what fueled the panic was not real. These claims led to a wave of high-profile criminal trials in the US, Canada, and beyond. The cases often followed a similar pattern. An initial report of physical or sexual abuse at a daycare would snowball, taking on a life of its own. Overzealous interveners, everyone from parents to police to counselors, would question children, some as young as 2 years old, in ways now known to produce false allegations. Children began to talk about animal sacrifices, blood rituals, secret tunnels, even cannibalism. Police would lay charges, prosecutors would take them to court, and the media would report uncritically on what seemed to be a growing threat.
Authorities searched frantically for evidence of an apparent ritual abuse epidemic across North America.
Some cases would fall apart at trial or during appeal.
What's crazy is that they're talking about tunnels. And the tunnels is what really intrigued me, because where have we heard about tunnels being underground before? Do I need to remind you all? Okay. You coming out of a tunnel, right? Mm-hmm. It looked like it. And you know, they just swept this under the rug. It's one of the things that like separates then from now is we have social media. So we could always go back and check receipts to see if this was just something that was put out in order to kind of like throw people off of the trail of what was actually happening. And we're seeing the shit happen today. There was a video, and and I don't know if you all seen this video, but it was going viral. He returned back to his apartment and he could not get in. So he eventually got inside of his apartment, the place where he was living at, and he literally found several beds, bunk beds in his apartment. He don't know how they got there. He was freaking out. Several bunk beds in your apartment, and you just got there and you don't know how they got there, right? You don't know how they got there.
I beg your pardon?
And I feel bad for those kids because they probably were really going through some stuff. And they just was like making it seem as if, oh my God, this isn't really happening. We don't have any evidence. Y'all are interviewing 2-year-olds.
Many of the accused spent years in prison, while others faced financial ruin and damaged reputations. As it turns out, the Satanic Panic may have its origins in Canada. When asked about the spark that set off the hellfire, many experts point to this book, Michelle Remembers, published in 1980, written by Canadian psychiatrist Lawrence Pastor and his former patient, Michelle Smith. The book provided a template for the allegations of satanic ritual abuse that followed. Pastor claimed he helped Smith recover repressed memories from her early childhood of a terrifying initiation into a secret cabal of Satanists operating near Victoria, British Columbia.
They would put me in cages. They would sacrifice animals. They would have a lot of candles and chanting and bizarre things I had never seen.
Did people think this was a fantasy, that you'd made this all up? It was such hocus pocus that it couldn't possibly have happened?
Well, I was one of the first to stand up and start to recount these kinds of things and to bring it publicly.
There was no evidence or witnesses to Smith's account, yet Pastor presented the book as a true story.
The hard evidence is difficult to find because if a child is sacrificed, that child's body isn't going to be left. If it's an Orthodox satanic cult, they're going to burn the body and they're going to eat it during ceremony, so they'll leave no evidence around.
Michelle Remembers was also one of the first books to suggest that underground satanic networks were not only real, but were infiltrating communities in an organized effort. Anyone could be a Satanist, your next-door neighbor, your dentist, or your daycare provider. It was an idea that stuck with many readers.
The book is called Michelle Remembers.
The book became an overnight sensation, and Pastor and Smith received a lucrative publishing deal, about $1.2 million in today's dollars. It also established Pastor as a sought-after expert on the burgeoning phenomenon of ritual abuse, a term he coined himself. There was even talk of a movie deal with Dustin Hoffman playing Pastor. For the McMartin preschool trial in Manhattan Beach, California, where 7 daycare workers were accused of ritually abusing children, Pastor was flown down to be an expert consultant in satanic cults for the prosecution. In another ritual abuse case in Bakersfield, California, Michelle Remembers was used as training material by social workers who believed they had uncovered an extensive satanic pedophile ring. Specialists in satanic ideology were suddenly in high demand as more and more ritual abuse cases went to trial. In Austin, Texas, another self-styled satanic cult expert, was used to secure the convictions of daycare owners Dan and Fran Keller, who spent decades in prison before being exonerated. It became increasingly common to see ritual crime training seminars led by psychologists, church groups, and even the police. Agent Ken Lanning, who studied the spread of the panic in the 80s.
All these people network with each other, and they'd all get together and go to seminars and discussions, and they'd be told this is what Satanists do and this is how they do it. And so all that is planted through the use of these kinds of techniques, hypnosis and other ways, that cause the spread of this kind of stuff. So many people say, well, you can't identify these cases unless you've been trained to learn about them. And some of that training becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
This part of the story, it rarely gets told. And I was really like looking hard to see where I could find out when Satanism got into the Black community, because it wasn't always there. And if it was there, it was very much so hidden. Basically, I was watching this documentary and it was called The Franklin Conspiracy, right? They primarily centered on this man named Lawrence E. King Jr. He ran the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union out there in Omaha, Nebraska. He was a Black man. He used to have these Diddy parties, which was like lavish parties. He used to invite people from out of town. And they said that he was doing drug trafficking, human trafficking of children. They were doing cannibalism. There was several interviews that I saw in which like children were trying to let it be known like this was happening, and they were just sweeping it under the rug because they were involved. That's why.
Constant. For those who don't know, the Franklin scandal started in 1988 when multiple prominent Nebraska politicians and businessmen were linked to a child trafficking ring in Omaha, Nebraska. According to reports, this trafficking ring was responsible for bringing in children from all over the world who were forced into prostitution. The main character in this scandal was a guy named Lawrence E. King Jr., who ran the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska. He would allegedly host these lavish parties where children would be brought in and SA'd by grown men. The feds later raided the Franklin Credit Union during an embezzlement investigation, where they allegedly stole tens of millions because, well, you need money to fund these cults. But surprisingly, nobody ever got caught or punished for any of it.
They were saying stuff that like Satan was infiltrating like everyday life. Like schools, cartoons, toys, music, and even church youth groups. Like they were saying that it was everywhere. Heavy metal bands were accused of doing backmasking, which is something that we have all been hearing about. We've been hearing about backmasking since the Beatles. If you ever heard of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart, look that up. They literally have on the cover Aleister Crowley. If you don't know who Aleister Crowley is, which I'm quite sure most of you all know who he is, look it up. They've been doing backmasking since before this satanic panic shit even came to play. Black men were disproportionately targeted if they were associated with alternative religions like Yoruba, Ifa, Santeria, which were falsely labeled as witchcraft or satanic practices.
In a certain way based on what they have seen. Y'all can't read these words, but I'm gonna read them to you. He put out right before he died. He said, "I'm ready to die and nobody can save me." Biting the bats' heads off, drinking blood, urine, all that stuff in the concerts, basically just devil worshiping. He said, but it's coming for the African-American kids. Busy Bone came out talking about the Mr. Ouija. It was written backwards, and you hold it up to the mirror, and it was a confession that you speak. They opened up our community to that spirit. Wow.
Let's go to that real fast. Like Public Enemy, NWA, Two Live Crew, they were all seen as evil influences, and I could see why. I wouldn't look at, Public Enemy as being something that would be a demonic force. However, we could say, as much as we love NWA, their asses was toxic. They were all about killing, pimping hoes, getting drunk, partying. That's what NWA was about. Two Live Crew, we know that they was all about booty shaking, pop that coochie, and all of that stuff. They took it from the rock community and blended it in with Black culture. And we were being warned about it, but like it really just kind of like took it to a whole nother level. 2000s, the early YouTube days, that's when we started getting those selling their soul for the devil, selling their soul to the devil, Rumors started spreading about record labels. They were doing the Illuminati networks. All of that started coming into play, but people were just saying that it was just BS. Like they literally put a spell on our music. I didn't know that devil worshiping was even in the Black community until I heard like Bone Thugs and Harmony, 3 6 Mafia, and Brother Lynch. I didn't know anything about it, but I was just like, they over here playing with Ouija boards, talking about I'm talking to the devil. Yeah, that was some new shit that they really did take our music and they corrupted it. And they've made it to where you wouldn't even recognize the change. Even when it comes to gospel music, easy for them to dangle some money in front of these artists and be like, okay, you have to go from talking about Black unity, talking about partying. Now we need you to talk about killing your own people. We need you to talk about pimping your women. We need you to talk about beating up your women. We need you to talk about robbing and stealing and crime because we need you all to hold on to this demonic energy that we already have in the industry, but we need you to put it in yours now because we know that y'all gonna spend money on it. We know that you all are going to follow the leader. And that's exactly what we did. That's exactly what we did. If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to click that bell. That way you will receive notifications as soon as a new video drops.
Which further amplified the perception that satanic ritual abuse was widespread. But there was never any evidence of a satanic conspiracy. In 1994, a psychologist from the University of California researched over 12,000 accusations of ritual abuse, but found no substantiated reports of organized satanic groups who sexually abused children.
Of course not.
In later years, as the panic died down, Pastor tried to distance himself from the claims he made in Michelle Remembers.
I'm not there to believe or not believe. I'm there to try and understand what they're trying to tell me of an experience, whether that has actually happened to them or that is their way of trying to express a profound pain that they've experienced.
But neither he nor Smith ever publicly renounced the book's allegations. This strange period of moral hysteria serves as a reminder of what can happen when we abandon the pursuit of facts for a more sensational fiction. The question is, have we learned our lesson? I'm Lisa Bryn Rundle, host of Uncover Satanic. Listen to.
Have we learned our lesson? Did you hear that? Tell me that it's not still happening. It's still happening. It's happening even like more and more in your face. This is what happens when the same people who are possibly doing this are in control of the media, are in control of the news, in control of the story. These things were happening. They were happening. And it's sad that it's like those children are adults now. And they're probably gonna have to go through the rest of their life knowing that they had this story or that they had these things happen to them and nobody believed them. Now I'm starting to understand why people be coming out about stories like 20, 30 years later. Because when they run to the authorities and they say that they've been abused, y'all asses don't believe them. Listen. If the children said that they did that, they did that shit. Say that the Satanic Panic was not really even about Satan. That's what they say. They say that it really wasn't about Satan. Some would say that it's just really about control. It's really about control, controlling what people believe, what they listen to, how they lived. It exploited fear, police, culture, religion, and even race. But it exploited those kids more than anything. One of the reasons why it's important for us to not be afraid to tap into back in the day. Sometimes you got to go back to the past in order for you to know how to move forward in the present. It's only up to us to make sure that the past does not continue to repeat itself in our future. Obvious, because they hid this story, it has, and it's still going on. But that's all I got for you all today. I'm going to get up out of here. Listen, don't shoot the messenger. Only receive the message. If it's for you, receive it. If it's not, leave it. Let's keep the conversation going. Don't forget to leave a comment in the comment box. What are your thoughts? Has the Satanic Panic continued to grow within our current reality? Is it still going on in America? If you're not in America and you live in another country, were you aware of the Satanic Panic? Let's keep the discussion going. I love to read your comments and I appreciate all your support. I'm gonna get up out of here. See you all next time.
Just trying to stay sucker free in a world full of lollipops. I'm seeing all the ops. Fake news, fake views. It's an illness, the cure to the sick shit. It's the pretty realist.